Maya Chen stood at the entrance of the Interstellar Academy of Excellence, her worn leather boots feeling suddenly inadequate against the liquid metal floor that rippled with each step. Above her, 3 artificial suns cast a perpetual golden glow across the crystal spires that made up the galaxy's most prestigious training facility. A host of alien students glided past her on gravity discs, their expressions ranging from indifference to poorly concealed disdain. Cadet Chen, a melodic voice chimed from behind her. Your biological signs indicate elevated stress levels. Would you prefer a neural calibration before orientation? Maya turned to face Administrator KXL, a towering figure whose translucent skin pulsed with patterns of light that matched their speech. No thank you, she replied, straightening her standard-issue Earth Force uniform. I prefer to stay uncalibrated. KXL's skin flickered with what Maya had learned to interpret as confusion. As you wish. Though I must note that you are the first candidate in 3 centuries to decline preliminary neural optimization. Just maintaining authentic human cognitive patterns, Maya said with a slight smile. It was a phrase she'd practiced, one that sounded better than, I don't want anyone messing with my brain. The orientation hall was a vast hemisphere filled with hundreds of beings from across the known galaxy. Maya counted at least 30 different species, some humanoid, others decidedly not. A group of crystalline entities floated near the ceiling, while what appeared to be sentient gas clouds clustered in a corner, their colors shifting in what seemed to be animated conversation. Look, a voice dripping with artificial perfection cut through the ambient hum. The humans finally sent one that walks on its own legs instead of rolling around in powered armor. The speaker was Zixra, a Centaurian whose cybernetically enhanced body gleamed with the latest quantum mesh technology. Her comment drew snickers from her entourage of equally augmented classmates. Maya had been warned about this. Humans were seen as technological infants by many advanced species, barely out of their planetary cradle. Earth had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, while some of these civilizations had been crossing galaxies for millennia. At least I won't short-circuit in the rain, Maya replied, remembering the briefing about Centaurian cybernetics and notorious vulnerability to water. The snickers turned to gasps, and Zixra's optical enhancers flared a dangerous red. Before the situation could escalate, a resonant tone filled the hall, and a holographic figure materialized at the center of the room. Director Omega, a being of pure energy contained within a humanoid form, commanded immediate attention. Welcome, candidates, the director's voice reverberated through both air and mind. You represent the finest young minds from your respective civilizations. But being here does not guarantee your success. Of the 1,000 candidates in this room, only 100 will be selected for full admission to the academy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The selection ratio was far more brutal than anyone had expected. Tomorrow begins the ultimate survival trial, Director Omega continued. A series of challenges designed to test not just your technological prowess, but your fundamental understanding of universal principles. You will face environments where your advanced systems may fail, where your neural enhancers may glitch, where your quantum computers may crash. Maya noticed several candidates shifting uncomfortably, including Zixra. She could almost hear their internal processors struggling to calculate these new odds. You have 24 hours to prepare. Choose your equipment wisely. And remember, in the history of the Academy, no human has ever passed the trial. The director's form dissolved, leaving behind a tense silence broken only by the soft whir of cybernetic systems and the crystalline chime of quantum communicators as candidates rushed to contact their support teams. Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a simple leather-bound notebook and a pencil. As those around her interfaced with AI advisors and accessed vast neural databases, she began to write, sketching basic physics equations and survival principles she'd learned from her grandmother, a wilderness guide back on Earth. Fascinating, a quiet voice said. Maya looked up to find one of the gas cloud entities had drifted near her. It condensed slightly, taking on a more defined shape. I am null. May I ask why you create physical marks on processed plant matter? Because sometimes, Maya replied, continuing to write, the simplest solutions are the most reliable. Null pulsed with what might have been interest. Your species' reputation for unconventional thinking appears accurate. Perhaps this trial will prove more intriguing than anticipated. As the preparation period began, Maya couldn't help but smile. They all expected her to fail, to prove that humans didn't belong among the stars. But they had forgotten something crucial: humanity hadn't reached the stars through neural optimization or quantum computing. They had done it through persistence, creativity, and the ability to solve problems with whatever tools were at hand. Tomorrow, she would show them exactly why humans deserved their place among the stars. The transport ships emerged from hyperspace above Nexus 7, a world perpetually shrouded in swirling violet storms. Maya stood at the viewport, watching electrical discharges large enough to swallow Earth's continents dance across the planet's atmosphere. Around her, her fellow candidates interfaced with their neural networks, downloading last-minute data about the planet's conditions. Final equipment check, announced the trial supervisor, an artificial intelligence matrix hovering in the center of the transport bay. Remember, you must reach the designated sanctuary point within 6 hours. Those who fail to arrive will be automatically disqualified. Maya double-checked her pack: compass, water purifier, rope, and the tough environment suit she'd modified herself. Nothing quantum, nothing neural, nothing that could be fried by an electromagnetic pulse. Next to her, Zixra was running diagnostics on her quantum mesh armor, its surface rippling with diagnostic patterns. Still planning to rely on prehistoric technology, human? Zixra asked, her voice modulator perfectly calibrated to convey contempt. I've calculated a 98% probability that you'll be the first to fail. Save your processing power for the trial, Maya replied, securing her boots. She'd noticed something during the briefing that none of the others seemed to consider important: the sanctuary point was located in a valley of naturally occurring magnetic ore. The same ore that played havoc with advanced navigation systems. The descent was rough. Violent storms buffeted the transport ships, and Maya could hear the worried murmurs as several candidates' neural enhancers began experiencing interference. The ships landed on a plateau of black rock, where purple lightning struck with clockwork regularity every 3 minutes. Your time begins now, the AI announced. May efficiency guide your path. The candidates scattered, most activating personal shield generators or environmental protection fields. Maya watched as Zixra and her group engaged their quantum propulsion systems, shooting off toward what their navigation systems told them was the shortest route. Maya went the opposite direction. An interesting choice, came Noel's voice as the gaseous entity condensed beside her. You are aware that the sanctuary lies southeast? According to the magnetic sensors, yes, Maya replied, carefully timing her movements between lightning strikes. But look at the rock formations. This is an old riverbed. Water always finds the easiest path downhill. Null pulsed with curiosity. Your species relies on such environmental indicators rather than precise measurements? We rely on both, Maya said, beginning her descent down the ancient riverbed. But we don't trust technology enough to forget the basics. The first hour proved her right. The storm intensified, and soon the plateau was filled with the sound of failing equipment. Quantum propulsion systems crashed, neural navigators went haywire, and even basic force fields began to flicker and die. Maya kept moving, using the rock formations as cover between lightning strikes. She'd covered her environment suit in the conductive black mud from the riverbed, making herself less attractive to the electrical discharges. Above, she could see other candidates either retreating or stubbornly pushing forward with failing tech. Null stayed near her, seemingly fascinated. The gaseous entity's natural form was actually an advantage in these conditions, able to condense or expand to avoid the worst of the storms. You anticipated this technological failure? I read about similar conditions on Venus, Maya explained, ducking under an overhang as another lightning bolt crashed nearby. Sometimes the simplest solution is to work with the environment instead of trying to power through it. They reached a sharp drop in the riverbed, where the ancient water had once formed a waterfall. Maya could see several candidates trapped at the bottom, their advanced climbing systems useless in the magnetic interference. Zixare was among them, her quantum mesh armor now nothing more than expensive dead weight. "Need a hand?" Maya called down, already uncoiling her rope. She'd noticed the rough texture of the rock face, perfect for old-fashioned climbing. "We don't need primitive assistance," Zixare snapped, but her voice modulator couldn't quite hide the tremor of fear. Another candidate, a silicon-based life form named Crix, was more practical. "I accept your help, human. My crystalline structure is not adapted for vertical navigation without technological assistance." Maya secured her rope and began helping others climb out of the depression. Each one was surprised to discover that physical exertion, while less elegant than quantum propulsion, was remarkably reliable. Even Zixare eventually accepted the help, though she refused to acknowledge it verbally. 3 hours remaining, the AI's voice cut through the storm. 47% of candidates have either retreated or become incapacitated. 30% have not moved from their original positions due to equipment failure. Maya did the math. That meant less than a quarter of the candidates were actually making progress. As if to emphasize the point, a brilliant flash lit up the sky as someone's power armor overloaded, requiring emergency teleportation off-world. "Your methodology appears to have merit," Noel observed, helping to stabilize the rope against the wind. "Though it seems inefficient compared to functional quantum technology." "Efficiency isn't everything," Maya replied, helping another stranded candidate. "Reliability matters more in survival situations. Besides, who says this isn't efficient? We're making steady progress while others are stuck troubleshooting their tech." The next 2 hours were a grueling test of endurance. The magnetic interference grew stronger as they descended into the valley, rendering even basic electronic compasses useless. Maya relied on her observation of the terrain and the ancient riverbed's course, leading a growing group of candidates who had abandoned their failing technology in favor of her primitive methods. Even Zixare had gone quiet, her earlier disdain replaced by reluctant attention as Maya explained how to read the terrain and use natural features for navigation. The Centaurian's optical enhancers had failed completely, forcing her to rely on her rarely used organic vision. As they approached the valley floor, Maya spotted the sanctuary's entrance, a cave mouth marked with bioluminescent indicators. The magnetic ore in the walls created a natural Faraday cage, protecting those inside from the storm but also making it impossible for advanced tech to function properly. 1 hour remaining, the AI announced. Current successful arrival rate, 12%. Maya turned to the group that had formed around her. "Last stretch. Remember, keep low, use the rocks for cover, and time your moves between the lightning strikes. Just like we've been doing." They moved as a unit, Maya's primitive techniques having forged an unlikely team from various species. When they finally entered the sanctuary, they found only a handful of other candidates had arrived before them, mostly species with natural adaptations to extreme conditions. Inside, Director Omega's holographic form awaited them. "Congratulations on completing the first trial. You have demonstrated not just survival skills, but the wisdom to adapt when technology fails. Some of you," the director's gaze lingered on Maya, "have shown remarkable leadership in adverse conditions." Maya caught Zixare's eye. The Centaurian gave her a slight nod, the closest thing to acknowledgement she was likely to get. Null pulsed with what Maya had learned to recognize as satisfaction. "Rest well," Director Omega continued. "Tomorrow's trial will test different capabilities. And remember, this was merely the beginning." Maya sat down on the cave floor, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion. She pulled out her notebook, now water-stained but intact, and began writing down observations about the day's events. Around her, other candidates were trying to repair their equipment or discussing the possibility of incorporating some of her methods into their existing systems. Perhaps, she thought, this was the real purpose of the trial, not to prove the superiority of any one approach, but to demonstrate that true advancement comes from combining the best of both worlds. As she wrote, she could hear the storm raging outside, nature's reminder that the universe cared nothing for technological sophistication or primitive techniques, only for what worked. The remaining candidates gathered in the briefing chamber, their numbers significantly reduced after yesterday's storm trial. Maya noticed how the survivors had subtly reorganized themselves. The rigid species-based groupings had dissolved, replaced by clusters of candidates who had worked together to survive Nexus VII's storms. Director Omega's hologram materialized, accompanied by a three-dimensional projection of what appeared to be an ancient structure. Welcome to the second trial, the labyrinth of the predecessors. Deep beneath this facility lies a maze constructed by an ancient civilization that predates all of your species. Your task is to reach its center and retrieve an artifact. The projection zoomed in, revealing corridors lined with crystalline formations that pulsed with an inner light. However, the director continued, the entire complex is suffused with quantum interference fields. The deeper you go, the more your technology will be affected. You have 8 hours. Zixra raised her hand, her quantum mesh armor still showing signs of damage from yesterday. Will we be provided with shielded equipment? No, Director Omega replied. The purpose of this trial is not to overcome the interference, but to succeed despite it. Begin. The entrance to the labyrinth was a massive archway covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. Maya hung back, watching as other candidates rushed forward, already activating various scanning devices and mapping programs. Their eagerness may prove counterproductive, Noel observed, condensing beside her. The gaseous entity had proven to be one of the more adaptable candidates, perhaps because their natural form relied less on technology than most. Maya nodded, studying the symbols. These markings, they're not just decorative. Look at how they're arranged, it's like a flow chart. She pulled out her notebook, quickly sketching the pattern. The ancient builders left instructions, hiding them in plain sight. Crix, the silicon-based life form she'd helped yesterday, crystalline structure glinting in the dim light, moved closer to examine her drawing. Most intriguing. We have been attempting to scan and decode, when simple observation would suffice. The first wave of candidates had already disappeared into the maze. Occasional flashes and sounds of frustration echoed back, suggesting their technological solutions were already failing. Maya continued studying the symbols, noting how certain patterns repeated. It's a warning system, she announced. These symbols show where the interference fields are strongest. And look, there are markers for safe passages, but they're subtle. You'd miss them if you were relying on scanners. A small group had formed around her, including several who had followed her guidance during the storm trial. Even Zixra lingered at the edge, pretending not to listen while her optical enhancers recorded everything. The predecessors were not primitive, Maya explained, pointing to specific symbols. They were so advanced that they learned the value of simplicity. These markings aren't technology, they're communication designed to survive any technological failure. Together, they entered the labyrinth. The crystalline walls hummed with energy, and within minutes, most scanning devices and neural interfaces began to malfunction. But Maya's group moved steadily forward, following the ancient markers that became clearer once you knew how to read them. They encountered their first major challenge at a vast chamber filled with floating platforms. Several candidates were already there, trying to use quantum levitation devices to cross, with mixed results. Some platforms seemed stable, while others would phase out of existence when approached with active technology. The platforms are linked to the interference field, Crix observed, their crystalline sensors picking up subtle vibrations. Each activation of technology strengthens the field. Maya studied the chamber's walls, noting how the symbol patterns had changed. It's not just a crossing, she realized. It's a message. The predecessors are telling us that sometimes moving forward requires letting go. Letting go of what? Asked a tentacled candidate whose natural bioluminescence provided additional light. Our assumptions, Maya replied. She picked up a small crystal from the floor and tossed it onto the nearest platform. It landed and stayed. The platforms are real and solid. The interference field only affects them when we try to control them with technology. We're making this harder than it needs to be. One by one, they crossed the platforms on foot, helping species less adapted to physical movement. Null simply floated across, their gaseous form unaffected by the interference. Even Zixra, after much hesitation, deactivated her quantum mesh armor to make the crossing. Deeper in the labyrinth, they found evidence of other candidates' attempts. Abandoned equipment littered the corridors, and occasionally they heard the distinctive sound of emergency teleporters activating as others gave up. The symbols led them through increasingly complex passages. Maya's notebook filled with sketches and observations, each chamber teaching them something new about the predecessor's philosophy. They weren't just testing survival skills, they were teaching a lesson about the relationship between technology and understanding. 4 hours remaining, announced an automated voice that somehow penetrated the interference. Current successful progression rate, 8%. They reached a chamber that pulsed with intense energy. At its center, floating in a column of light, was the artifact they were meant to retrieve. Around the chamber, frustrated candidates worked with failing equipment, trying to find a technological solution to reach it. Maya studied the symbols, then smiled. The final lesson, she said, pointing to a specific pattern. The predecessors are telling us that the most advanced technology of all is understanding itself. She walked to the edge of the energy field, then reached through it. Her hand passed through unharmed, allowing her to grasp the artifact, a small crystalline cube that seemed to respond to conscious thought rather than technological interface. Director Omega's hologram appeared, somehow unaffected by the interference. Congratulations to those who have understood. The predecessors believed that true advancement lies not in the tools we create, but in our ability to understand when to use them, and when to set them aside. As they made their way back to the surface, Maya noticed Zixra studying her own deactivated armor with new interest. Perhaps, the Centaurian said quietly, there is value in maintaining some primitive capabilities. Maya just smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but something had shifted. The candidates were beginning to understand that the trials weren't about proving the superiority of advanced technology or basic skills, they were about learning to use both wisely. The third day of trials dawned with tension thick in the air. Only 30 candidates remained from the original 1,000, and the reality of their situation had finally sunk in. They weren't just being tested, they were being transformed. Maya sat in the preparation chamber, making final adjustments to her equipment while observing the others. The remaining candidates had split into 2 distinct groups, those who had embraced the lessons of adaptability, and those who desperately clung to their technological superiority, viewing the trials as a temporary challenge to overcome rather than a lesson to learn. Today's trial will test more than your individual capabilities, Director Omega announced, materializing in the center of the chamber. You will be divided into teams to face a scenario that no single approach can solve. The holographic display showed a massive orbital station in critical condition. This is Legacy Station, a research facility that houses some of our civilization's most important historical records. A quantum core malfunction has triggered a cascade failure. Your teams must work together to prevent the loss of irreplaceable knowledge. Maya found herself assigned to a team with Zixra, Null, Crix, and 3 other candidates. The Centaurian's initial disdain had evolved into a reluctant respect, though she still struggled to fully embrace what she called retrograde methodologies. The station's systems are in flux, the director continued. Some areas will support advanced technology, while others will reject it entirely. Choose your approaches wisely. Failure will result in the loss of humanity's earliest records of space exploration. Maya's head snapped up at this detail. This wasn't just any historical data, these were her people's first steps into the cosmos. She caught Zixare watching her reaction, the Centaurians' optical enhancers whirring as they adjusted focus. "They're testing our ability to cooperate," Null observed as their team gathered to plan. "The previous trials forced us to question our dependence on technology. Now they want to see if we can integrate different approaches." The transport to Legacy Station was tense. Through the viewport, Maya could see the massive structure's normally sleek surface marred by patches of quantum distortion. Other teams were already arriving, their ships docking at various points around the station's circumference. "We should split into specialized units," suggested one of their teammates, a crystalline entity named Vex. "Those with advanced tech can handle the stable zones, while the less equipped can manage the disrupted areas." "No," Maya and Zixare said simultaneously, surprising everyone including themselves. The Centaurians' optical enhancers flickered in what might have been embarrassment. "She's right," Zixare continued after a moment. "We've been thinking about this wrong from the start. It's not about choosing between technology and basic methods, it's about understanding both well enough to know when to use each." Maya nodded, pulling out her notebook. "The station's quantum core is similar to what we saw in the labyrinth. The predecessors knew this could happen, that's why they left us those lessons. We need hybrid solutions." Their team developed a strategy that paired tech-dependent and tech-independent members together. As they moved through the station, they encountered exactly what the director had warned about: zones where advanced technology functioned perfectly alongside areas where it failed completely. But they were ready. When Zixare's quantum mesh armor failed in a critical section, she remembered Maya's lessons about reading environmental cues. When Maya couldn't calculate complex quantum fluctuations in her head, Crix's crystalline computing provided the answers. Null's ability to shift between states made them perfect for scouting ahead, identifying which approaches would work best in each section. Other teams weren't faring as well. Those who had refused to adapt found themselves repeatedly stalled, unable to progress through tech-dead zones. Those who had abandoned technology entirely couldn't interface with the systems they needed to stabilize. The breaking point came 3 hours into the mission. A massive power surge ripped through the station, causing widespread system failures. Maya's team was deep in the station's core, trying to reach the main data archives. "The quantum containment field is collapsing," Zixare announced, her enhanced senses picking up the deterioration. "We have minutes before we lose everything." Maya studied the failing systems, her mind racing. The predecessors must have faced something similar. Look at the station's basic structure, it's built in layers, like the labyrinth. There's always a backup, always a simpler way hidden beneath the complexity. She found what she was looking for, a manual override system, elegant in its simplicity, hidden behind panels of advanced technology. But reaching it required crossing a section of intense quantum disruption that would shut down any active tech. "I need your armor," she told Zixare. The Centaurian hesitated only for a moment before beginning to remove her quantum mesh suit. Maya wasn't asking her to give up her technology, she was asking her to trust that sometimes, the old ways were the right ways. Working together, they created a chain of assistance. Null condensed themselves into a pathway through the disruption field. Crix used their crystalline structure to refract and weaken the quantum interference. Maya, protected by Zixare's adapted armor but carrying only basic tools, made the final approach to the override system. "This is what the trials have been teaching us," Maya said as she worked, her hands steady on controls that hadn't been touched in centuries. "The most advanced civilizations don't just create new technology, they understand and preserve the foundations it's built on." The station stabilized. The historical records were saved. But more importantly, something fundamental had shifted in how the candidates viewed themselves and each other. As they regrouped in the aftermath, even the most tech-dependent teams were quietly discussing ways to incorporate more basic methodologies into their approaches. Director Omega appeared before them, their holographic form somehow more substantial than before. You have begun to understand. Tomorrow brings the final trial, one that will reveal why humans were truly invited to join the Academy. Rest well, for you will need both wisdom and technology to face what comes next. Maya caught Zixare adjusting her newly reactivated armor. The Centaurian's usual perfect posture showed signs of fatigue, but there was something different in how she carried herself, a new integration of organic movement with technological enhancement. Perhaps, Zixare said quietly, the true test was never about proving which approach was superior. It was about learning to be superior by mastering both. Maya smiled, adding final notes to her well-worn notebook. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they were no longer facing them as representatives of different philosophical approaches. They had become something new, pioneers of a middle path that honored both the advanced and the fundamental. The final trial awaited, and with it, the truth about humanity's role in the galaxy's future. The final morning of the trials brought with it an atmosphere of anticipation that even the Academy's atmospheric regulators couldn't quite filter out. The remaining candidates gathered in the grand amphitheater, their number now down to just 20. Maya noticed how differently they carried themselves now. Gone was the stark division between the technological elite and the primitives. Each survivor had learned to balance both worlds. Director Omega appeared, but this time the hologram was accompanied by something else, a panel of beings Maya recognized from her historical studies. Representatives of the First Contact Council, the ones who had originally reached out to Earth 50 years ago. You have proven yourselves adaptable, resourceful, and capable of growth, Director Omega began. Now it is time to reveal why these trials were designed as they were, and why humanity was invited to join the Academy at this specific moment in history. The holographic display expanded to show a vast section of uncharted space. We face a crisis, one of the council members spoke, their form shifting between energy and matter. Our civilization has reached a critical point of technological advancement. We can reshape planets, harness the power of stars, and bend spacetime to our will. But with each advancement, we lose something fundamental. Another council member continued, our greatest minds have become so dependent on advanced technology that they can no longer solve problems without it. We face an evolutionary dead end of our own making. Maya felt Zixare stiffen beside her. The Centaurian's optical enhancers were recording everything, but her organic eyes were wide with understanding. The humans, the first council member resumed, represent something unique. A species that achieved space travel while still maintaining their connection to fundamental principles. They understand both the value of advancement and the importance of basic knowledge. We didn't invite them to learn from us, we invited them to teach us. The amphitheater erupted in murmurs. Maya felt the weight of every gaze, but she kept her focus on the display, where a new image had appeared, a massive structure unlike anything she'd seen before. This is the Nexus, Director Omega announced. An ancient artifact we discovered at the edge of known space. It contains knowledge that could revolutionize our understanding of the universe. But every attempt to access it with our most advanced technology has failed. Your final trial is to find a way in. The candidates were transported to the Nexus site. The structure rose before them like a mountain made of thinking metal, its surface covered in patterns similar to those they'd seen in the labyrinth. Teams quickly formed, but this time without any central direction, each candidate gravitated toward those whose skills complemented their own. Maya found herself at the center of a group that included Zixare, Noel, Crix, and several others who had embraced the synthesis of old and new. They studied the Nexus from multiple perspectives. Zixare's quantum scans provided data while Maya's observations of the physical patterns revealed relationships the scans missed. "Look at this," Maya said, pointing to a recurring pattern. "It's similar to the navigation markers from the labyrinth, but there's something different." She sketched quickly in her notebook, then held it up next to Zixare's holographic scan display. "The patterns shift when observed with technology," Crix noted, their crystalline structure resonating with the Nexus's energy. "But remain stable when viewed organically." "It's not just a lock," Noel realized, their gaseous form rippling with excitement. "It's a test. Like everything else in the trials, it's asking us to prove we understand the balance." Maya walked the perimeter of the structure, her mind racing. The Nexus wasn't rejecting technology, it was rejecting dependency on it. Each pattern was a puzzle that required both technological analysis and basic observation to solve. "We need to synchronize," she announced. "Everyone, power down your tech to minimal levels. Zixare, can you maintain just enough power in your quantum mesh to record the pattern shifts? Crix, we need your natural crystalline resonance. Noel, your ability to perceive multiple states simultaneously is crucial." Working together, they began to decode the Nexus's message. It wasn't a door that needed to be opened, it was a dialogue that needed to be understood. The structure responded to their balanced approach, each successfully decoded pattern leading to the next. Other teams watched and learned, adapting their own strategies. The competition of the earlier trials had given way to collaboration, each success building on the others. Maya's notebook filled with sketches and observations, while Zixare's quantum databases captured the subtle energetic changes their more basic approaches triggered. The breakthrough came when Maya noticed something so simple it had been overlooked: the patterns weren't just symbols, they were teaching tools. The Nexus wasn't just a repository of knowledge, it was a blueprint for how to advance without losing touch with fundamental principles. "It's not about going backwards," Maya explained as the final pattern began to align. "It's about understanding where we came from so we know where we're going. The most advanced technology in the universe is worthless if we forget the basic principles it's built on." The Nexus responded to their understanding. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, and an entrance appeared, not through any technological mechanism, but through a simple shift of its physical structure. Inside, they found not the advanced technology they had expected, but something far more valuable: a methodology for maintaining balance as civilizations advanced. "This is why humanity was needed," Director Omega said, appearing among them. "You haven't just reached space, you've maintained the wisdom to keep one foot on the ground even as you reach for the stars. This balance is what our civilization needs to continue advancing without losing itself." Maya looked at her fellow candidates, no longer divided by their technological levels, but united in their understanding. Zixare was already integrating basic mechanical backups into her quantum mesh armor. Noel had learned to use simple physical tools even while maintaining their gaseous form. Crix had discovered how to enhance their natural crystalline computing with organic observation techniques. The real challenge was never about proving which approach was better, Maya said, reading the final patterns. It was about proving that we don't have to choose. True advancement means carrying forward everything that works, whether it's a quantum computer or a simple lever. The First Contact Council materialized around them. "This is why we created the Academy," one of them explained. "Not just to teach, but to learn. Each of you who completed these trials will help guide our civilization toward a future that balances advancement with understanding." Maya looked down at her notebook, then at the advanced sensors and tools her teammates carried. In the end, neither humanity's primitive methods nor the advanced species technology had been the complete answer. The real solution had been learning to use both, understanding when to rely on each, and having the wisdom to know the difference. The Nexus hummed with energy, ready to share its knowledge with those who had proven worthy of receiving it. But its greatest lesson had already been learned: the future belonged not to those with the most advanced technology, nor to those who clung to the old ways, but to those who could bridge both worlds, carrying forward the best of everything humanity and its galactic neighbors had learned. As Maya began documenting the Nexus's secrets in her notebook while Zixra recorded them with quantum precision, she smiled. Sometimes the greatest solutions were neither primitive nor advanced, they were simply right.